Have you ever had just a completely exhausting day, pulled out your phone, and bought some ridiculously specialized kitchen gadget at 1 a.m. just to make yourself feel a little bit better? And then, boom, you're hit with this massive wave of regret the exact second it arrives at your door. Look, if you're nodding your head right now, I want you to know you're absolutely not alone. We've literally all been there. It's such a universal human experience. But today, we're going to unpack exactly why that happens, and I promise you, the reason goes way, way deeper than just not having enough willpower.
So here's the fascinating neuroscience behind that late-night impulse. When you buy something on a whim, you're not actually buying the product itself. You're buying the feeling you think that product is going to give you. And here's where our brains totally trick us. That massive spike in dopamine, that feel-good chemical, it actually doesn't happen when you finally get the item. It floods your system the exact moment you decide to buy it. You're literally experiencing the anticipation of a better you. But the catch? That dopamine hit fades incredibly fast.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a powerful module called mental breaks. We're going right past that standard surface-level advice of just make a budget to uncover the subconscious programming and the childhood beliefs that are secretly governing your wallet today.
Here's our map for today. We're going to cover 1. The emotional buying illusion. 2. 3 major triggers. 3. The cost of status. 4. Childhood phrases. 5. Identity self-sabotage. And 6. A letter to your past.
Section 1. The emotional buying illusion. All right, let's talk about the great illusion of consumerism. You aren't buying a new gadget. You're desperately trying to buy the feeling of competence, or maybe modernity. You're not just buying a pair of shoes. You're buying the feeling of being the kind of person who wears those exact shoes. But here's the thing. Feelings simply cannot be bought. They can only be lived. So the product inevitably fails to deliver that permanent feeling, which then tricks your brain into thinking, oh, well, the next product will definitely be the solution.
Think about this relentless biological trap for a second. It always starts with a negative emotional state. Maybe you're lonely or super stressed from work. Then you encounter a purchase stimulus, like a highly targeted Instagram ad. Bam! The anticipation dopamine hits as you imagine your better self. You make the purchase, and you feel this really brief, fleeting sense of control. But almost immediately, the guilt and the regret set in, dropping you right back into a negative emotional state. And honestly, it's often worse than where you started. And how does your brain want to cure that new negative feeling? Yep, it urges you to buy something else.
Section 2. 3 major triggers.
So let's break down what kicks this off. When your trigger is sadness, your internal narrative usually sounds like, I deserve a treat after what I've been through. It feels like self-care, right? But research actually shows sad people make terrible price decisions. They pay more and they resist commercial pressure a lot less. Now let's look at anxiety. Anxious buying is usually utilitarian. You buy things to feel prepared or to feel in control, but it's an illusion. The anxiety always comes back, and it usually requires an even bigger purchase next time just to get that same relief. And finally, boredom. This is probably the most underestimated trigger of all. With the absolute frictionless ease of e-commerce today, casually browsing and buying offers the perfect low-effort dopamine drip to cure a boring Sunday afternoon.
Section 3. The cost of status. The really crucial point to understand here is that caring about what others think isn't some sort of character weakness. It is a literal, evolutionary survival mechanism. Back in primitive tribes, your social status dictated your access to resources and protection. If you didn't care about status, you just didn't survive. But today, social media has basically mutated this primitive need into a massive, global comparison machine. You aren't just comparing yourself to your 150-person tribe anymore. You are comparing your messy, behind-the-scenes life to millions of perfectly curated highlight reels. Every single like on someone else's luxury post signals to your primitive brain that consumption equals approval.
When you go out and buy that designer bag or finance that really expensive car, think about what you're actually trying to put in your shopping cart. You're trying to buy approval, hoping people will respect you more. You're trying to buy an identity, kind of molding yourself into a certain type of person. You're buying belonging, just desperate to be part of an admired group. And perhaps most powerfully, you're buying protection from judgment. It's essentially an incredibly expensive shield to ensure absolutely no one knows you might be struggling behind closed doors.
Section 4. Childhood phrases and trauma. Now I want you to think about this. Before the age of 7, a child's brain operates in what's called a theta brainwave state. This is essentially a state of waking hypnosis. Because young kids haven't developed a critical filter yet, everything they hear totally bypasses logic and goes straight into the subconscious. The phrases you heard your parents say about money around the dinner table, they didn't just become passing memories. They became your automatic behavioral programming. Let's look at some really common ones. If you constantly heard, "money doesn't fall from the sky," your brain subconsciously linked money to extreme scarcity and hard struggle. That makes easy prosperity feel suspicious or even illegitimate to you today. Or if you heard "the rich are greedy," well, your mind instantly associated wealth with moral corruption. So what happens when you start making really good money as an adult? You unconsciously sabotage it, because your deep-seated programming is screaming that having money makes you a bad person.
And for a lot of people, the programming goes way beyond just phrases. It stems from actual financial trauma. And we really don't talk about this enough. Financial trauma is the emotional mark left on your actual physical nervous system by extreme events. Things like losing a home, seeing your parents constantly screaming at each other over crushing debt, or being publicly humiliated for not having enough. These events leave physical marks on your body's internal alarm system. Decades later, as a completely successful adult, a perfectly safe financial decision can trigger that exact same childhood panic. This leads to extreme risk aversion, an inability to ever enjoy your savings, or even a compulsive need to spend it before it disappears.
Section 5. Identity self-sabotage.
You probably know someone, heck, it might even be you, who constantly builds wealth and then just destroys it. They inherit money and lose it. They pay off a massive credit card bill only to max it out again a month later. Now, from the outside looking in, it just looks like a total lack of willpower. But science actually calls it identity self-sabotage. If your core internal identity is a person who has no money, acquiring wealth creates a massive psychological conflict. It's called cognitive dissonance. Your brain literally cannot handle the mismatch between who you believe you are and what your bank account says. So what does it do? It takes action to resolve the conflict by destroying the money, returning you back to that state of lack that feels like the real you.
Here's a pretty harsh truth to swallow. The fear of prospering can actually be far more powerful than the fear of failing. Why? Well, because prospering might mean leaving the identity of your family of origin completely behind. It might mean having to shoulder heavy expectations from other people. It might mean becoming a version of yourself that you simply don't even recognize in the mirror. And to the human brain, the unfamiliar is often way scarier than a familiar pain.
Section 6. Letter to your past.
Okay, so this next exercise is one of the most powerful things you can do to rewire your financial identity. But honestly, it's going to require some courage. I want you to find a quiet place. Get a real physical pen and paper. Please do not type this on a computer. Dedicate 20 uninterrupted minutes to writing a letter to yourself from 10 years ago. Write to the version of you right before the big financial losses occurred. The version of you that was just starting to form these limiting patterns.
As you sit there with that pen in hand, I want you to use these questions to guide you. What were you feeling about money back then that you never ever told anyone? What do you wish you had known about how your brain was actually working against you? What decision would you have made differently, and why? What do you want to say to that younger you about the intense shame you felt?
Please remember, as you're writing this, there's no right answer here. There's only your truth. This letter isn't for anyone else to read, unless you actively choose to share it. It's purely for you. It's a tool to safely confront the shame of the past without any judgment, so you can finally release the grip it has on your present life. And as you finish putting the final words on that letter, I want you to ask yourself one last really important question. How do you want the you of today to relate to money moving forward? Because you are no longer bound by the phrases you heard when you were 7 years old. You are no longer trapped by the survival mechanisms of the past. You have the power to rewrite your financial identity starting right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this sparks the curiosity you need to take back control of your financial mind.